Hello and a very warm welcome to Cultural Communication Confidence with me, Victoria Reynoldson. And a very warm welcome to today's episode where we're talking about inclusive communication for World Cultural Diversity Day. Now, I am recording this at the time of, it's almost 21st of May, and this is World Cultural Diversity Day, which is a day to celebrate diversity all around the world, including dialogue and development. Now, I am celebrating this particular day because I obviously am very lucky and grateful to work with people all over the world. In fact, I work with people from over 40 countries, and my real goal is to work with people in at least 100 countries. So that is part of what lights me up and excites me. And why? Well, I clearly am doing a lot in the world to share more about inclusivity and how do we work with culturally diverse groups. And the interesting thing is that through my work, I really get to learn as well. So it comes from a place for me around my curiosity and interest in the world. And whenever I work with an individual or a group of people, the absolute joy for me is that I get to learn as much about other cultures, as well as learning and teaching about my own culture and also sharing about cultural intelligence. Now, I talked particularly about the topic of diversity and inclusive communication recently in a masterclass video that I created for the STEM Amazing Women membership group. Now, this amazing group is all about helping, encouraging, and supporting particularly women in STEAM careers. So that is science, technology, engineering, architecture, and really encouraging them to make the most of their careers and fulfill their potential. I was talking particularly about inclusive communication because they felt their group of business leaders really needed to have the skills to bring people together wherever they're working around the world, or whether they're working with diverse groups of people in one location. Now, I felt this was really relevant to share here as well on my podcast and in my videos, because I felt this was a very important topic to be talking about. So I'll be sharing here today the key strategies to make sure that we are all being inclusive in our communication and aware around some of the elements that we may need to adapt in our communication approach to be really connected and bring people together. So let's talk about how we do this. So the first point is that clearly I'm somebody who talks a lot here on this podcast about cultural intelligence. We need to start from a place of being open to understand others. And a great way for us to talk about similarities and differences in teams is through the language of cultural values. Now, cultural values are a set of value maps that help us to really describe what might be going on in those differences in approach, in professional behavior and communication style. They are well researched and validated, which means that the language of them is very inclusive and it helps us to describe what's going on without labeling in a negative way or adding judgment to what is happening. Now, cultural values is a huge topic in itself, and I have recorded a previous episode on that, so I'll leave a link to that particular episode in the show notes. But from cultural values, it can then be really helpful to think about how do we approach communicating more inclusively. Well, I think there are a couple of elements we need to be aware of that perhaps don't help. And this includes, for example, use of humor, banter, or fast speech. Now, those are a couple of elements I've grouped together Because what happens is that sometimes humor is relying on in-jokes or cultural references that might not be clear to others. So really kind of challenge yourself when you're using humor, when you're having banter across a team, or if you're speaking very quickly, is that being inclusive to everybody who's joining that meeting, joining that conversation? So that's the first place to start. I then want to touch on idioms and jargon and buzzwords. Now, idioms are particularly challenging and they don't necessarily translate across languages. So if you have a group of people who are multilingual, multicultural, just be aware that if you use an idiom, you may think you're illustrating your point in a visual way, but it may not land because actually that idiom doesn't have meaning for that person. They don't quite understand the imagery of it. Equally, jargon and buzzwords. I think, these are often overused and they may not be clear in meaning. I, in fact, did another episode all about that recently, and I again will put an episode link in the show notes to that. But really be very careful to make sure that if you are using jargon, language of your department or of the business or the industry, that everybody in the room really understands that meaning. They really get it. Now, I also talk a bit about the alignment of your verbal communication and your non-verbal communication. Occasionally, what happens is that people say things like, for example, with the humor, but their non-verbal communication doesn't necessarily align with what they're saying. So the message is confused. So if you are communicating something, express it simply and clearly, and make sure that your body language reflects what it is that you're trying to say. Now, there is also the point about cultural references. Now, cultural references are really difficult for people if they're not aware of their significance. So if I think about particular moments or things that have been happening recently here in the UK, I might think about the coronation of King Charles. I might think about Eurovision, which is a European song contest. I might even think about the football championships that are going on here and some people love following. These are cultural references, and although they are interesting to some within the group, they may not be very meaningful to others. So just be aware that if you're making small talk, informal conversation, that if you refer to events, things that are happening right now, that either you explain them so the whole group understands what's going on, or perhaps you talk about another topic which is more generic that everybody will really be able to get involved in the conversation about. And then finally, inclusive language. Now, inclusive language includes elements such as thinking about how English particularly is a very live language. This means it's constantly evolving. There are always new words coming into the common usage, and some examples might be post-truth. You also might hear obvs, which is short for obviously, and that was shortened after a particular character used it in I think a TV show from several years ago. But things like this, the way that language is always evolving, again, it's like jargon and buzzwords. We need to make sure that everybody understands what we're talking about. So either avoid these kind of words or make sure you explain them. Make sure everybody knows what they mean. So now I'd like to move into more about the strategy. So what can you actually do, particularly if you are the leader of a team, or actually if you're part of a team, how do you really make sure that you are being inclusive, apart from avoiding these elements that I've talked about? Well, first of all, I referred to this already, but it's about speaking simply. So speak in simple, short sentences. Don't make your sentences too long or complicated. and just use a simple way of expressing an idea so that everybody is clear. Also, it may be helpful to send out anything that needs to be pre-read before a meeting. Sometimes there are groups of people who are not so comfortable responding spontaneously to ideas, giving their points of view. And it can be helpful, particularly if you are not confident about how everybody will want to respond to these ideas, that you send out documents before the meeting itself to really allow people to pre-read, consider their points of view, perhaps even discuss in mini groups before they turn up with their own views at the meeting. Now, I think it's also really important to check in regularly during a meeting and just to really make sure that everybody is following, that you're summarizing perhaps key sections of your conversation so far, or even inviting other people to just asking them to summarize for you. Just make sure that they have understood and reflect back what they're taking out as their key actions or key points to remember. And it is important to do this because culturally there are some groups of people who may not be comfortable, particularly in a group setting, to say, I don't know, or I didn't really quite understand that, or I'm not sure about this point. So this is quite important to allow that space to really check in understanding and check alignment. And then the final point here is that with a very diverse group, it can be helpful, particularly before large meetings or even at the team or project kickoff, to establish ways of working and establish how you want to interact with each other, communicate with each other. And this is where communication charters can help. It's really about taking into consideration people's suggestions about how they want to communicate and interact with each other, and then agreeing what does the team way look like. This is really helpful so that people are aligned on what are the behaviors, what are the communication approaches that are expected, and people really sign up to that so everybody knows that before they enter into any significant meeting. So as we come to the end of this episode, let me ask you a few reflection questions. I would love to know about your own experiences and what have you learnt and taken out of working in culturally diverse groups? And which of these particular strategies today resonate with you and that you think you can take away and put into action with your own team? How can you be more inclusive in your communication? Well, I wish you a great celebration for World Cultural Diversity Day. And if this particular episode resonates with you, I want to tell you about a brand new opportunity to work with me. I am offering for global executives who are looking to elevate and amplify their communication to the next level as they get ready for leadership, an opportunity to work with me in an individual program. Now, this particular program is all about helping you to speak up more confidently, to connect with groups that you're leading and managing, understanding how you take a culturally intelligent approach to lead those teams. And it's also about handling the challenging conversations, the difficult situations like conflict and difficult feedback. Now, this particular program is a unique opportunity because it's going to be a 6-month program with a real blend of coaching, traditional coaching, training with exercises and tools, and also mentoring. So I would love to know if you're somebody who feels that you're a global executive on your journey to the next level, and this really appeals to you. I would love to talk to you. because I'm really looking to find the right match with people I feel would get the best results from this particular program. So if you want to learn more about that, get in touch with me. You can find me over on LinkedIn, or equally, you can find all my links in the show notes below. And I also have one other ask today, which is about this particular podcast episode. If you have found value in it, I would absolutely love it if you could, one, share it with somebody else who would benefit from it, and two, let me know. I love to hear your feedback on what has particularly resonated for you and what your key takeaways are. It's these particular stories and this feedback that really lights me up and really makes me excited, because I know then that I'm having impact with this particular podcast. For me, this is part of my mission to really get out in the world and connect people through the power of communication and cultural intelligence. This is what I want to achieve, and I want to give as much value as possible in achieving that mission. So I would be really grateful if you could share this. You could tell me what you find particularly useful. And if you're feeling particularly generous, I would absolutely love it if you would leave me a review on your particular platform. That would mean a lot to me as well in helping me to achieve my mission. So thank you so much for joining me today on this particular episode of Cultural Communication Confidence, and I look forward to seeing you next time.